everybody. Welcome to Podcasty For Me, the podcast about film, culture, politics, and Clint Eastwood, where we watch every film directed by and or starring American filmmaker Clint Eastwood and explore how they speak to their moment. And this one, boy, it's a doozy today. Show's hosted by two guys. I'm one of the guys. My name is Jake Serwin.
I'm one of the guys. My name is Ian Ryan. Now, past guests on the show have observed, I think with a range of affects, politely supporting suspicion that I may be less Clint-pilled than you are, Jake. And if that is true, if I have accumulated any credit for being less of a diehard, uncritical fan, I would like to spend all of that credit today on this film, on this incredible film.
Have you been pilled? Have you taken the pill?
I've been 15, 17 pilled, that's for sure. That's undeniable.
How far up your arm is the Capri Sun CGI from the mirror?
It's like halfway up my neck.
Is it into your mouth?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So upsetting. Great. I'm really excited for you to have become pilled. First of all, I gotta say, happy birthday, buddy. It's not your birthday, it's the podcast birthday.
It's true.
This is exactly 1 year since our first episode came out. We did it on January 6th because we thought it would be funny and also easy to remember.
Yep. And it was one of those things.
It was at least one, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling? Are you feeling older, taller?
Yeah, I've aged for the first real time in my life. This is the real step that I've taken, I think, that we've taken
You're
together.
like Bart Simpson. You just have your 10th birthday over and over again.
Yep.
Cool. Pretty cool. Let's bring our guest in. Really excited about this one. Our guest today is a writer, a co-host of the Slow Learners podcast, a Clint Eastwood expert, at least from our perspective. Our second ever guest on the show,
right.
Returning triumphantly, Hail the Conquering Hero, John Semley is here. Hi, John.
Hey, John.
Hello, thank you for having me. And I realized I did, when I did the Iger Sanctuary episode, sort of invite myself along to be...
No.
For this episode.
You basically pitched that we could have a good episode on this movie by having you back. So we're like, okay, that sounds great. Let's have a good one instead of whatever we would normally do.
Yeah, and I assumed that this was some type of irony move, that you were coming back out of prurient interest in talking about this.
Oh,
but
no.
Now I've learned.
Knew,
okay.
Yeah, I knew that this is a special one.
Yeah, I actually reviewed this movie when it came out. So I was 15, 17 pilled, or stoned, as I like to call it, from pre-release.
Everybody must get stoned. Do you think Bob Dylan's seen this movie? Huge question.
I don't know. Bob Dylan is one of those guys I don't think watches movies. Although he does like paintings of like shots from William Friedkin movies and stuff like that.
What was didn't he say there was a movie he talked about having liked? I think it was a Denzel movie because of the hurricane. He had talked about how...
Deja Vu?
Was it? Yeah, no, this was going around on Twitter, like...
Oh, because of the movie, The Hurricane. I thought you meant...
Yeah. Yeah, but he said that he liked Denzel Washington. Did he say that he wanted Denzel to play him? It was some, like, very easily viral...
I think, you know what? I think he did say that.
This.
I recall that now, yes. And it was based on something weird, like... What's that movie called that you recommended to me where Denzel's in Jamaica investigating a murder?
Oh, yeah. The Mighty Quinn.
The Mighty Quinn. Yes, I think it's for that. Yeah.
Oh well, that's a Dylan track, or
right?
Exactly. And there's
Fairport
like
convention
a
track.
reggae version of that in the film. Everybody, check out The Mighty Quinn.
Wow.
A wonderful watch. Denzel sings. He wears little shorts. Come on. We're not talking about that today. Today we're talking about the 1517 to Paris. And I've used this word before. I've used two of these words. I'm going to use them again. This film is, not only is it podcasty for me, trademarked adjective interesting, it's also beguiling, I would say.
Yep.
This is what a
I'm so excited,
film.
Man.
I'm so excited
to talk about it.
This movie gives me the feeling of, in the words of the great internet /podcaster critic Lex G, the "what am I looking at" feeling more than most modern movies I can think of. Where, having seen it like 5 to 6 times, every time I'm just like, what is this?
There's something, I don't know what it is, and we're not talking about the movie yet officially because we have to do our stupid thing that we do. But
right.
There is something worth examining in the fact that this same year, Tom Stern also shot The Meg, which is one of the worst looking movies I've ever seen, like released by a real studio.
Mm-hmm.
Fakest least engaging, just sort of a repulsive to the eye. There's something going on here. But let's get our 2 questions out of the way. This is, of course, our signature segment where we waste time by talking about something else for a minute to get to know our guest and each other. So, John, were you able to prepare a question or 2 for the 2 questions?
Well, my first question is, in the spirit of the film, have either of you ever gone on a backpacking trip through Europe?
No, but,
okay, but
I have taken some trains in Europe, and my question was going to be, you're taking a train in Europe. So, no, I have not done that, but I've done some of what they do in this. I've been to 1 or 2 of the cities that they go to, and
right.
Shout out to European trains.
Oh,
what about you, Ian? Have you?
I have. I took a extremely stereotypical 18-year-old post-high school trip to Europe with 3 of my good high school buddies. And we did a lot of the things in this film. And then some of the other things I just did this summer when I went to go see the Eiger, and also went to Rome and did like 3 of the 4 things they do on screen here. And I can also say that although there's a massive age difference between when I was 18 and how old these guys are on screen, it was a similarly desperate and horny energy to the whole trip of being in Europe. I think that's part of the charm, you know, if you're going there, not just as a man, I think as a young person generally going to the old country. I
do need to note, and John, I hope this doesn't disturb you too much, these are our precise peers. These are our this is our cohort. These guys were born the same year as Ian, a year after I was born. So they're like, we're the same age as these men.
I could feel it. I felt tapped into their rhythms.
Yeah. I felt tapped into their purposelessness and their staring out the window of a community college class. I certainly felt tapped into that.
I'm your senior and their senior, but I do think that part of the beauty of the film is that the experience of going on a predetermined route of sites in Europe into the shittiest hostel bars and gaudiest nightclubs is a sort of eternal experience.
It's true.
Yeah. There'll always be a kind of Dutch nightclub like the one they go to for
and there always has
all
been,
of time.
I think, a type of...
There always has been.
Right.
Yeah,
that's where they built Amsterdam around the nightclub. They found the nightclub and they're like, we got to put a city here. What about you, John? Have you backpacked through Europe?
I did a version of that when I was like 30, because when I was younger, I never had the means or wherewithal to do any of that. And I grew up in Canada, so I don't think it's like a thing quite as much that you do out of high school, but I had a period when I turned 30 where I went to Europe kind of by myself for 6 weeks, but I did have a Eurail pass, but I would spend like 2 weeks in each place. So I went to like Germany, Czech Republic, Amsterdam, and France.
You took the Sadler route, you're saying. You slowed down, you enjoyed things a little bit more.
Exactly.
That's the Scarlatos route.
And I've been back a couple times and made use of the Eurail and Thalys trains. So I don't know if I've done it post seeing this movie. Anyways, my point is I haven't had the opportunity to say snacks at 12 o'clock yet on a Thalys train, but I would relish the opportunity.
I would as well. I believe, sadly, they have retired the Thalys name.
I
think they're now Eurostar again or something.
I will say last summer, I guess, I went to Italy with my now wife, and in Venice, I made a point of going to the gelateria from this film.
Wow.
Nice.
Did you get the hazelnut? What'd you order?
I think I got coffee flavored just because that's my favorite, but I did make a point of saying grazie a couple times, which is like, in my memory of the movie, we can talk about when we get there, they say grazie like 20 times, but really it's just like 3 or 4.
It's part of, I mean, I felt so seen by this movie and so humiliated for all the like stories I've told people about my trip to Europe that are just not interesting to anyone except me. And it's fine that they're interesting to me.
Yeah.
And this movie captures such a banality about and a sort of sweet sadness about what it is to be an American who goes to Europe to go look at it.
This movie, it almost reminds me of that movie, Jack and Jill, the Adam Sandler movie, which I've always thought was just like a very long setup for a punchline of Al Pacino doing a fake Dunkin' Donuts commercial. Yeah. And this movie just feels like it is spinning its wheels intentionally. It's so daring you to be bored constantly just to have
Yes.
like a fairly gripping 10-minute scene of a terrorist attack on a train at the end.
I'm not much of an A.O. Scott fan, but he said of this film,
His review,
its radical plainness is tinged with mystery. And I think he was exactly right. I think that's correct.
And I'm now going to start describing myself that way as well, because I think I'm going to tell people that my radical plainness is tinged with mystery. Yeah, that's a great review. I was going to quote something from it later as well. We got one more question. John, did you have another one, or do you want me to freestyle? How are we doing?
You guys can. I'm done to answer one. I mean, does it have to be related to the film per se?
No, not at all.
Well, I did want to ask. I mean, just to stay on topic. Who do you identify? Let's say we were the three real heroes.
I was going to ask
this.
Perfect.
A lot.
Who would we be?
Ian, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. And I hope that you take this in the spirit that it's intended. Okay. Sometimes Anthony Sadler kind of reminded me of you facially. Like, he makes some of the same faces as you. I think he's by far the most handsome of the three. And he's got an aloofness that reminds me of you. So, Ian, I'm going to nominate you as Sadler. And I'm not going to make any jokes about any kind of like makeup you might be wearing.
I graciously accept, in part because he said a bunch of things that were uncannily similar to how my cousins talk, my also from California, pretty close to us cousins, which may just be a way of me saying that's how I talk. I'm just less aware of it because I don't hear myself.
Right.
I think you're the Sadler, and then
I nominate myself as Spencer Stone.
Okay.
Because I'm extremely adept at taking off and then putting back on 20 pounds. Okay. Especially like this time of year.
Have you ever thrown away a whole burger or half of a burger before?
Oh, certainly.
Oh, wow. You're locked in, I think.
I was going to say, John, we're all sitting down and cropped from the camera here, but you give the sense of a tall man. And I think if the two of us had to run at somebody to try to stop them, I would guess you'd be better at it than me.
Maybe. I'm tall enough to embrace a full 6 feet, as Leonard Cohen once put it.
Beautiful.
But I identify with the Spencer Stone phenotype, if not the... I've never felt like destiny was pushing me towards anything.
Which leads me to...
Your Scarlatos.
Obviously
the coolest
Scarlatos.
One. Yeah.
I'm a third place Dancing with the Stars winner. Placer.
Also quite a handsome gentleman. Feels like he definitely got jacked up for the film, which I respect.
I distinctly disagree. I think he is he's got one of those faces that you cannot get a bead on, in my opinion, where like every time I look at him, I'm surprised again.
You asked me once about the football star of my high school. He looks quite a bit like the football star of my high school, who could also run like a 40 in 4 seconds or something.
It is a weird sort of subplot in this movie that Scarlatos is obsessed with going to Germany to embrace his family's military history.
This is
wonderful. But
I
think I read that more as more sort of Christian upbringing acceptable for he really wants to go see the pretty German girl who was an exchange student.
I think
he says that it's about connecting with grandpa.
Both, but I think there's the clumsy recursion which matches the entire project of the film, of him not really knowing whether he is like his grandfather and feeling kind of like a poor copy, or maybe, like a modern interpretation or something.
Yeah.
I think it fits wonderfully.
I think like copies and bad knockoffs and everything is like, it's all over this movie.
Crucial to the film. Yeah, I completely forgot what I was going to say. I thought it was very funny that his name isn't Alex, but his full name contains the sounds of Alex.
Alex Scarlatos.
Yeah. It's really weird. It's a weird move. Similarly, my parents named me James Serwin. There's like a Z sound into an S sound that I've always bristled against. So I'm relating to him more and more, and I will be running for Oregon State Senate as a Republican in 2024, just like Alex Scarlatos.
Yep. Good luck to you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. It's important to me that the forests are properly managed, which I assume means making them available to development if he's running as a Republican. Anyway, let's talk about the film, The 1517 to Paris. Even the title, is part of this whole sort of alienating project, because you have to figure out that it's a European time from the very beginning of learning about the film. Exciting to me.
Or military time.
Military, exactly.
A scheduled train It's this repeated action that's never quite the same, sort of takes on a new meaning and new significance each day that it's repeated.
Yes.
So yeah, I think
you never step on the same train twice.
Exactly.
And it invokes the Western
The
while also
providing,
it shows you how far we are from the sort of the Western archetype of the lone actor who can come in and change things.
Absolutely.
It also...
This was directed by Clint Eastwood.
Yes, tell us.
Important for me to interrupt you to say that it was directed by Clint Eastwood. Came out February 9th, 2018, basically a Valentine's Day movie. 2 years since Sully, so he takes a sort of an uncharacteristically long break, but this is another 2 Clint movie year because The Mule is going to come out in December of 2018. So
I will say part of the production length might have been attributable to Spencer Stone within the frame of the production of the movie having to put on and then lose 30 pounds.
Did he put it on, or did he just... I was wondering if he just had like a pillow under his shirt.
I think he did a full Raging Bull body transformation just to be like different versions of himself.
Fascinating.
Which is part of the insanity. Well, I mean, I could talk about the training montage for an hour.
But the training montage, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
We'll get to it. So some quick crew stuff. So these guys write a book, which is what you do after you've had... Do you guys remember this incident? I remember hearing about this.
Vaguely, but,
a passing, like a 48-hour news cycle story, basically.
Yeah.
It took place in 2015, I believe. The 2015 Thalys train attack in August of 2015. August, a rough time to be backpacking around Europe.
It's hot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a shirtless guy at a train with 2 guns.
They don't believe in air conditioning. Maybe that's why he took his shirt off. I've been wondering that, but it might just be...
Also a bad time to visit Europe because most of those decadent socialist nations have a month holiday and it usually falls in August. So you end up going and it's insanely hot and also everything's closed because people are on holiday.
Yeah, it opens for 3 hours a day, the museum, and you have to sneak in there with every other American person.
Yeah.
Right. And they're all confused and getting angry. Like, why isn't it open for me? I'm here to look at it. So for folks who don't recall this, there was a lone assailant on a commuter train from Amsterdam to Paris who was quickly subdued by 3 Americans, French American and a British passenger, who basically prevented potentially mass death, and they were quickly rewarded or lauded by various heads of state. The gunman Ayub El-Kazani was initially, he claimed to have been homeless and just trying to rob the train, and then
ludicrous.
Later
he found the guns in a park. Very funny.
Yeah, he found 300 rounds, but he was later discovered to have potentially traveled to Syria and interacted with some people who at least the Western states have aligned with ISIS, but he was acting alone, clearly. And then they write this book. Clint decides to make this movie. Apparently he was working on an adaptation of this book, Impossible Odds, about an aid worker in Somalia, a woman who was captured by pirates and then freed by SEAL Team 6 specifically, which I had not heard about until researching this. Can't really find a lot of information on that. I don't know how far along it got, but he drops that to work on this. They were initially looking to cast professional actors, and it got as far as a report by some trade outlet that Kyle Gallner, who was in American Sniper, he was Bradley Cooper's spotter guy, also played the Flash on Smallville to connect to some weird stuff we've been talking about on the show. Jeremy Harris, who is on some of the Noah Hawley shows like Legion and Fargo. And then Alexander Ludwig from Vikings.
Not only is he from Vikings, I love to talk about this man only because he is a fascinating figure who is in both Final Girl and The Final Girls, which I think is just...
like Sigourney Weaver being an alien in Aliens.
That's exactly right. Yep. Perfect parallel.
Very similar. So they were being eyed for Scarlatos, Sadler, and Stone, respectively. Eyed being one of those impossible to pin down trade industry terms because they hadn't received offers. And then in the behind-the-scenes stuff on the Blu-ray, the casting director says Clint said to him, "They have such great faces. They don't make faces like this anymore."
Doesn't make any sense.
Which I would reply, maybe they never had. I mean, they do have interesting faces. And, you know, part of what's interesting about the movie is that they're very clearly not actors and not, they probably never would have been, except maybe Sadler. I think Sadler's like symmetrical enough that you could believe him being like a TV actor or something. But
right.
Which is interesting because I think he is the person doing the most wooden acting, which we'll talk about. I don't even necessarily mean that as a bad thing in terms of the greater project of the film, but he's the person who comes across the least expressively.
The movie is set up as if it's going to be from Sadler's point of view, where there's like
that intro,
a prologue of them driving around in a convertible with like no indication of how it relates to the rest of the movie.
It's a Chevy convertible. So I learned this is a Chevy convertible that was gifted to Spencer Stone on the Jimmy Kimmel Live show when they were brought on to be celebrated as American heroes. And so it's his actual car that they're driving around.
You want to hit us with that first line of dialogue, Jake? I don't know if you have this on hand.
I don't have.
I think I have it committed to memory.
Okay,
where
please,
he's like,
John. Yeah, I didn't want to.
You're probably wondering what a brother like me is hanging out with these two crackers.
That's correct.
But believe it or not, they're my actual friends, or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
and it's like, where does that line of dialogue come? Like in a movie, was it 2019? It came out.
Uh-huh.
It's like you have to like it's the 1940s. You have to do table setting to be like a black guy, have two white friends.
Yeah.
But that's not the craziest thing you're about to hear.
The movie starts with somebody taking a front flip into a dumpster, and it somehow recovers from there. So I think it's a real
and also that's after the poetic tone-setting intro of the terrorist getting on the train.
Yeah. We have a similar... So just to finish the thought, Clint decides, you know what, I'm actually going to cast these real people. He's been making these, this is his third in what many have pointed out as a kind of tetralogy of like real life hero movies. So after American Sniper and Sully, he's decided to cast the real guys as themselves. Now, we our Sully episode hasn't come out yet, but we did play the clip of Chesley Sully Sullenberger appearing as himself at the end of Daddy's Home 2.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
And which does really excite me with the prospect of Sully playing himself, because his acting is on par, I think, with the three from this film. But Clint then decides to keep it going. So Mark Magoulian, the guy who gets shot, plays himself. His wife, Isabel Rissacher Magoulian, plays herself. That's the blonde woman with the dog. Chris Norman, who is the British man who helps hold them down, plays himself. So we have like some more non-professional actors sort of reprising their real life role. And then he fills out the cast almost exclusively with sitcom actors, which is a fascinating move that we'll get to. But yeah, this intro is just so, I mean, like Sully, which opens with, in that case, a nightmare version of the water landing gone wrong, where the plane crashes. This movie keeps sort of reminding us like what this is all building to. It keeps cutting to the like train attack
towards to it.
Yeah. And which really like hammers home this idea that Spencer Stone especially keeps talking about, that their lives are catapulting them toward this one crucial moment that will define them.
I love this because it is, of course, a line that when most people say it, it is a fairly deranged thing to say. This is like the extreme of delusions of grandeur about what your destiny is. Because it's not just believing. You point out, I did read your review, John. It's a wonderful review. I recommend it.
The Globe and Mail.
Yes.
Terrific review.
5 stars.
Yes.
And I think we only had a 4-star system.
And you still.
And I'm going to give 5 stars to the review itself.
Yeah. That's what I thought you were saying. I also give it 5 stars. So you talk about, the sort of balance between fatalism and stuff in here. And I think obviously he is taking a strange position, because it's not just saying that he has a destiny, but also that he is destined for something unique and special. And we get this sort of echoed by the Christian mom, not his mom, but Jenna Fisher.
Christian mom is going to be on our episode next week.
Right. Yeah.
His Christian mom is our guest.
Saying that, I prayed and, this is Alex's mom. She says that I know that there's something special waiting for you.
Something very exciting.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so fascinating to pick these characters because those things happen to come true. And I don't even doubt that they had those beliefs beforehand, right? But it's just fascinating to pick these figures against the millions of people who say things like that to themselves, who listen to weird, Les Brown motivational speeches about capturing your dream, and your dream is your blood, and your blood motivates you, or whatever, this stuff.
All grind set stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the film almost forms it's almost a shame that the mule mucks up the chronology, but like a trilogy specifically with Sully and Richard Jewell, because I feel like all those movies are about the way that we, or these characters, live in a culture, meaning America, which puts a great value on notions of like heroism and sacrifice and military duty, but that there is no sort of sane outlet for those things.
Yep.
Right.
This kind of does the Richard Jewell thing too, where it's almost setting it up where it's like these guys basically have like school shooter psychology, but they're good guys, so don't worry. And in the same way that Sully is essentially about a man being punished by the institutions around him for being a hero. Where the idea of like, well, heroism is no longer valued. In fact, you'll be put on trial and have to compete against a flight simulator to prove that you're any good.
Right. To take like an individual to make a call outside of protocol to try to sort of take matters into your own hands is like punishable.
Yeah. And I think that like this movie, the thing that makes it insane to me is that it is basically dealing with that crisis in the sort of collapse of the valuation of heroism in America by having these guys restage the thing they did that made them heroic, and having literally these guys do it,
Yes.
Like that this will never lead to anything. This is your one thing.
Yes.
And why don't we just do it again and again and again and again forever and ever and ever? And then you never have to like leave that moment.
It's a fascinating, because like, American Sniper and Sully and Richard Jewell as well, they all are contending with PTSD or with, the events keep like recurring in the minds of these men. They can't escape this one moment. And this is like immersion therapy or something. Like kept waiting for anyone to talk about that on the Blu-ray and on the behind the scenes thing. And Scarlatos, who is the most poised, he's clearly like the one who would go into state politics, because he just knows how to like deliver a prepared line weirdly outside of the film. He is the one who mentions like they're not acting, they're more or less remembering. And then it cuts to Isabel, the wife of the man who gets shot through the lung and neck, and who is like literally screaming again, watching like fake blood shoot out of her husband's neck again. And she says, with her little dog in her arms, she says, it was occasionally a little bit difficult. Like that's as far as she can get.
Yeah.
So we're also like, these are people who are they're not trained in expressing or even like analyzing the things that are inside them.
Yeah.
Who are asked to do it again. There's that really revealing moment where Spencer, when he's working at the Jamba Juice, asks asks the Marine if he would pick the Marine Corps again, if he could do it all over. And he says he's never thought about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think in this movie, it's sort of in conversation with movies like, Herzog's Little Dieter Needs to Fly, or those Josh Oppenheimer movies like The Act of Killing and The Act of Seeing.
The
Look of Silence.
The Look of Silence, yes.
Where those ones are almost about people like reenacting wartime or experiences, in the case of the Oppenheimer films, almost as a form of to catch their consciences in the Shakespearean sense, or in Herzog's almost as a form of like purgative, like you say, therapy for this horrible experience the character has as a POW. Yeah. This is like a dementia village for the three heroes where they can just like go and be there and play around in their greatest moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And go back and like I kind of made a joke on Twitter when I was rewatching this for the podcast. I'm like, I'm pretty sure by this point I've seen this movie more than anyone involved in it.
Right.
And my friend Will Slow's like, I feel like the guys probably watch the movie a lot.
He's exactly right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys are.
It's like I could see that.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with the documentary film theorist Bill Nichols. He's like the big name in documentary criticism.
I love his coins though.
Oh shit. Yep.
Sorry, that sucks.
Yeah, it's all right. He has an essay about reenactment in documentaries and sort of the strangeness of that, right? And I think he talks about some of the same films you just referenced, John. He also talks about the Patricio Guzman film, Chile Obstinate Memory. So you guys probably know the Patricio Guzman Battle of Chile trilogy, right? Very famous films, which are fascinating. I suggest that anybody who hasn't seen them go watch them. Filmed during the rise of Allende and during right up until basically he is deposed by Pinochet. So an incredible cultural document. And then he made this documentary where he goes back to Chile after his exile because his previous documentaries have been outlawed under the military junta. So he comes back and shows it to a bunch of students who don't really have like a great historical sense of the event. Wow. And then he also asks people to do what you're talking about, kind of the Josh Oppenheimer thing of he gets like Allende's bodyguards to walk the route they walked. Now they're like old men doing it in this like late 90s or whatever the film comes out, sort of like failed technocratic world, So it's just like tinged with all this ironic sadness to see these people in this environment where their dream, didn't come to fruition. So I think what you're saying is right in that we can't even just compare it to other films where people reenact their, famous experiences, because I think it's so specific to how it's framed to those people and how it's framed to the audience. And I think this film in particular takes such a neutral approach to the whole thing. Neutral, almost dangerously neutral, but in a way that I think means I just love it because it's just representing their vision basically of the event.
Yeah, and I also think that like accounting for it. I mean, I remember in the marketing, it was like the trailers were like starring the real heroes.
Yep,
right. But it's like
I remember this too.
The sort of Occam's razor, like Eastwoodian explanation for this is always just like economy. Oh, we can't find people who look like this. Let's just get the guys to do it. They can do it. They know how to do it. They did it.
What's so exciting to me, because we've been talking, I've been falling off the auteurism train for the last couple of episodes, I think, because so much of the contradiction or the difficulty of pinning down these last few films we've watched really feels like it comes from the screenplay, and Clint, famously picks a screenplay he likes and shoots it no notes. And this one takes it's such a directorial decision. Like it really informs the entire film, this very specific direction that he decides to go with in casting, in having the real people reenact it in a way that he hasn't done for such a long time. He hasn't been in a lot of the movies. So it's just so exciting to see, without question, so much of the aesthetic and affective and even thematic resonance of this movie is like it's Clint's decision without question. Like Paul Greengrass's version of this movie or whatever would not be the same.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
And I do think it's like, and I actually think the auteurist argument in a strict sense is almost easier to make with these movies. Like my wife showed me this article in the New York Times the other day about how, it was an essay. I don't know if an article is even the right word, but it's basically positing that like Taylor Swift is a closeted gay woman, and she's Gaylor. Yeah. And she's like signaling it to the world in a surreptitious way, but even she might not know that she's gay and all this. And it's like, again, my normal brain explanation is like, well, maybe just Taylor Swift cynically signals to gay audiences so that they like her music, like, whatever. But that to me is like such an auteurist reading in the sense, like, I feel like that about this period of Eastwood, where it's like, he is doing all these things. He's engaged with these ideas almost without even knowing that he's doing it, Right. And it's like that to me is like a pure auteurist argument where it's like, the sort of quote anti-intellectual filmmakers like Eastwood or someone like John Ford, where it's like these themes or ideas emerge and become so obvious despite themselves. Like when Judy Greer has a line when she's like to the young Spencer, or maybe to the real Spencer, where she's like, when you used to hear the word war, you'd practically want to jump inside of the television. Yeah. It's like, how can you tell me that line is not about the fact that this film is substituting the media images of these guys with the real guys? Absolutely. And is engaged with a project of like totally blurring a difference between, history and the reenactment of that history, between things happening and how we remember and talk about those things, which is what he has been doing. Like American Sniper is about that. Sully is about that. Richard Jewell is about that. The Mule is based on a true story, obviously, but it does feel like more of a kind of Clint in the starring role, let's go watch him, drive around and eat ice cream sandwiches for 90 minutes type movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I feel like this movie, if you are interested in like late career Eastwood, like the 1517 is the fucking skeleton key.
It's so exciting. And, mentioning all those movies, I'm thinking about how all of them include televisions. And especially even Jersey Boys, there's that famous weird shot of...
Amazing movie. Also should totally be in the conversation with this kind of movie that we're describing, where he takes a stage musical, doesn't even treat it as a musical until the very end, where he does like a Godardian tout va bien ending that exposes the whole artifice of Broadway and filmmaking and all
Which is what we're doing by having like early in the pod guests come back on the show, and we're all dancing together, and no one's mad anymore. We're all in a beautiful heavenly harmony. Yeah, I mean let's talk about the beginning of the movie, because I read a little bit of the book. Have either of you read the book?
No. I don't care about any of this.
Immediately assumed it was I assumed it was going to be like because it's structured sort of Rashomon style or whatever, at least on the table of contents. It's like the three guys, and so I figured it's going to be from all their perspectives. It's not. It's third person. It goes into like the Shenzhen agreement like really early on.
Right. Nice.
It talks about like the history of Morocco, because the gunman was from Morocco. It's bizarre, but these guys are very Christian. They bring up God a lot in the behind the scenes stuff. Sadler's father is a pastor, and we get like glimpses of this, but it's through a Clint suspicion of institution lens, where the first real like, I don't know, Brechtian or alienating moment for me really was the parent teacher conference scene that ends with, well, first of all, it's got this what feels like a bygone critique of like over prescribing Ritalin. Like there's
it's so 90s, but I guess that kind of tracks with the time. I was like, you want me to drug my children instead of parenting them and reading them the Bible?
Yeah. Right. And like the, hang out with these two crackers guys, it never comes back.
I this is a critique, or like a film critic pet peeve of mine, so we haven't done this yet. I do think the first 20 minutes of this movie are like almost unwatchable junk. I think that they are so clunky. I do think that they ultimately contribute to the project, but it was like almost turn off the movie bad for me in terms of how all the scenes with them as kids. And I don't want to pretend like just because I think this is an incredible piece of art that it doesn't have this section that is like alienating in just an unpleasant way for me.
Well, but you get that line where Judy Greer says, "My God is bigger than your statistics."
Yes. Yep.
And like yells it. And I was reminded, so have you guys seen The Informant, the Steven Soderbergh movie?
Soderbergh movie,
Which is another movie where like every small role is a comedian, either a stand-up or a sitcom actor or both. And Soderbergh has said that he did that because when you have these little like 1 or 2 line parts, if you get a comedic actor, they're gonna sell it, they're gonna make it pop, and they're also gonna do it, they're gonna like hit it on the first or second take.
Also, The Informant is a comedy, I would argue.
Yes,
so it makes sense.
I mean, like they're
like Paul F. Tompkins in it or
Tom
whatever.
Papa is in it, as opposed to getting some specific like comedy actor. They're like stand-ups.
I will say that Tony Hale blowing the whistle and saying, "Oh, that's loud," was like a breath of like came up for air.
This is what I was going to say. Is what's fascinating is they're all as wooden as the non-actors, except for Tony Hale, weirdly.
Exactly correct. I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is like the kind of script in like opening like 20 minutes where there are lines delivered with no hit of irony or parody that are just like, okay, principal's office now. It's like worse than Saved by the Bell.
Yeah.
It's so strange, and it gives you the film doesn't want to come down on, and of course Clint in his famous we've described it on this show as he'll often talk about these movies as if he just saw them. He wasn't involved in their creation at all, but he says, you think that maybe there was some higher power riding with them because things went their way, but that's for everybody to draw in their own conclusions on that. Which, like, you're making the movie, like, but yeah, he's like, he is engaging with all these moments where they seem to have told their story as if it's like their whole lives were leading to this.
Yes. Following a path that was headed
following
here.
A path, which is very, as you said, like this very American idea that instills in each of us, this whatever main character syndrome, or this idea that we're all going to be important, while making it physically impossible for us to do that by even when when they get to the recruiting office, the guy assigning roles is bored and watching the clock because they're going to close in half an hour.
Yeah.
And these guys refuse. The thing that's so interesting about them is they refuse to let go of the idea that they're meant for something significant.
Which is an idea instilled in them in the movie by their history teacher, Jaleel White, Urkel, and Stefan Urkel, I should say.
Yeah, he's more in Stefan Urkel mode in this. He's
he's in swaggy Stefan Urkel mode, where he gives this big speech. He's like, FDR was great because he made a decisive action. If you are in that position, will you make a choice and take action swiftly? And then you look at the blackboard and they're talking about the New Deal.
I know, crazy, it's like crazy characterization of FDR.
I know, is that what the New Deal was? This heavily bureaucratized public works program is just I'm a man of action.
Trigger moment decision that he had to make. Yeah, I think it's incredible.
Yeah, therefore I'm going to leverage every government official. I mean, I love the New Deal. I love FDR, but it's not this kind of thing where it's like, what was your snap decision? It's one of the most thought through things to ever occur in American
extraordinarily
policy,
logistically complicated. Yeah.
But also because I know that you guys are always looking for the little whiffs or fart stenches of progressivism in any Eastwood movie. But it's there you have it in the background, this exaltation of New Deal style Democrats.
Well, yeah. And Clint in this interview thing, he also says, they were young Americans that you don't expect in this so-called millennial generation, which first of all, he's suspicious of the name. I mean, it's anyway,
so-called
to step up and do much, but these guys did. So he is doing as Clint Eastwood speaking as himself. He's talking about, basically millennials are lazy and no one wants to work anymore and all this. But then the film is so, for me, it was so cathartic in its depiction of a hopeless future, just a conveyor belt into, becoming a cog in the grand apparatus of late capital, and you can't really, you're going to work at Jamba Juice, or you're going to be the least qualified Air Force airman,
paramedic,
or you're, there's the incredible scene in the community college class or whatever it is, where, and you point this out in your review, John, where Scarlatos is wearing a Pale Rider t-shirt. He's got a t-shirt of Clint Eastwood, the rugged individual who shows up and fixes the town and defies the capitalists and runs them out to save the little guy. And Scarlatos is listening to this woman say, no matter what job you get, you're going to have to look at numbers. Yeah. All you're ever going to do is look at numbers.
Yeah.
And then if you're lucky, your military skills will be transferable so that you can work middle management at Nike.
Right,
exactly. That's the dream. To go get your fucking ass blasted off so you can work at a sneaker company in middle management. That is the horizon of possibility that the America in this film
They go to Afghanistan. Scarlatos is in Afghanistan, and his big event is that he forgets his bag and gets in trouble, and they have to. And it was such a beautiful characterization of this pipeline you're talking about, Jake. This idea that airsoft kid. I will tell you, I had one of these same airsoft friends who showed me his dad's real guns, and it was the scariest moment that ever happened to me when I was 13
of your life. Yeah, because you and a child are in the same room as a real gun. Well,
and it confronted me with the reality of why is this kid so weird? And it's maybe because his dad is a gun freak psycho who also put him on this track.
Can we do Airsoft Corner really quick? Because we talked a little bit about my airsoft experience on an episode that got lost. So on Christmas, I was at my girlfriend's parents' house, and her younger brother, her half brother, who's 22, was there. He's actually exactly 22. He's not even 22. He was there, and he had asked, his wish list included this boonie hat, very much like Gunny Highway wears in Heartbreak Ridge. Yep. And we thought it was silly, and then realized that he wanted it for airsoft, which is something that he still does all the time. And he went to go get his airsoft gear to put on with his hat to take a picture. And he's got these big tactical vests that look it's like military equipment. And so then we were all putting on the vests and the hat and taking
Wonderful
pictures.
Picture of you all geared
up. I will. And then he also brought out his airsoft guns, which are, they're movie ready M16s basically. And then another one that has, I don't even know what you call it, but it's got the little kickstand. it's not a sniper rifle. It's like a big ass, automatic thing with the kickstand and a big blocky magazine. And the guns are wearing little, basically like COVID masks. They're wearing, or like condoms or something that go over the end, and they have really stretchy straps that you pull back and hook to something on the back of the gun. And I asked why the guns were wearing condoms, and he said, you have to keep those on in the parking lot before everybody has their eye pro on. Yeah. Of course, eye protection.
Right.
So, it's I guess good that he's learning some gun safety stuff.
I mean, I grew up in Canada, so no one fucked around with guns up there.
Yeah, I mean, airsoft. I got shot with an airsoft gun by like another 12-year-old once. It hurts. I mean, it feels like we
had like BB guns and paintball guns, I guess. Yep.
But it's interesting how there's this camaraderie that they develop by like shooting at each other.
They say
they reenact their own death. Like when they're like playing war, they're all like dying together.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, man. This is awesome. The brotherhood.
The brotherhood history.
I was going to say, yes. Yeah. The history.
Yeah. Well,
and Urkel gives them, do you have any more World War II battle plans?
Yeah.
First of all, I don't know. I studied history in school. So it's like, you look at a fucking battle plan. It's insanely complicated to make head or tail out.
Yeah,
but the
like
idea
the
that these
arrows and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. They're getting like Operation Overlord diagrams. Like, whoa, so
exactly.
Cool.
Well, they seem to have learned something because they didn't take a train to Russia in the winter, which famously
smart.
The only strategy I know about. Their version of war is so bizarre because like
so abstracted.
Spencer keeps saying over and over again how he wants to help. Like in response to the thing about jumping into the TV, he says he just wants to help out. But then he's also like most excited about pararescue because they save people's lives. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of what we were talking about with American Sniper, where like this man is being lauded and celebrated for his like proficient murder. Whereas these guys are, at least they like these guys and Sully and Richard Jewell, they stopped death. They prevented death. And that's what they're being celebrated for. But like, he seems to have this idea that war is about helping rather than about ultimately
But I'm with John. I don't think that's a personal failure so much as a failure of like cultural perspective shifting, right? To make you feel like there's these limited avenues for being a person who contributes and being a soldier, a cop. I think it's this exact same idea that, many people go into these careers because they say, well, I wanted to help. I wanted to contribute. Right. And they have no other sense of history, basically, that would help them realize that that's maybe not achieving what they want to achieve.
What's so fascinating also is the way that they all seem to regard military service as something like to aspire to, or they like.
But again, it's not them. And I have a bit of an outsider perspective of this because I'm Canadian. I've only lived in the States for a few years. But it's like, I remember the first time I went to a Flyers game and it's like, now let's all stand up and salute the military.
Yeah, dude.
And I never really seen anything like that before. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, are we in like Weimar Germany after World War I? Like, what the hell is happening?
Verhoeven was a documentarian. For sure.
And it's like you watch football and there's a billion commercials about Rob Gronkowski wanting to get military insurance because it's better for you. Like the idea that there is like a warrior culture that is separate and gets like literal benefits. I mean, not if you actually serve in war and get PTSD and shit like that, but like within the culture, your service is supposed to be valued and regarded as noble. That's not a notion that Spencer Stone invented.
No, of course not.
It's like part of the oxygen of America, that the fact that these guys become obsessed with it. I mean, of course they do. It's like the way that like binge drinking is an essential part of the culture. Yeah. Everything around you is telling you that this is good and just. And I feel like a lot of the late period Eastwood stuff is almost him grappling with the cognitive dissonance in his own mind as an avatar of that kind of like sufficiency and heroism with the fact that that is no longer true.
Well, I mean, one of the kids, I think it's Spencer's room, has a Letters from Iwo Jima poster in it, which is like...
Of all the ones
I know.
to have,
it's the anti-war one, the one that least
the most
valorizes
anti-war. Yeah.
I think in case you are not American, and like Jake said, being able to speak to these guys' exact upbringings, also bad era Warriors posters, on the walls of my house. So they, on Saturday mornings, you would have cartoons, and between cartoons, you would have advertisements for the Marines that were filmed like a cutscene from a like Final Fantasy video game where there would be a big lava monster and they would throw a sword to a guy and he would leap down.
The Marines were so big on the sword thing. They were really like, hey kids, if you join the Marines, you get a sword.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's insane. I mean, I think my mom at the time was very upset, and now I understand why, right? That this is airing for children.
What was the name of the Army video game that was the computer game that was really popular? They made like a free, basically the Army made like a free Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
That was like, that was officially the Army, and apparently it was like pretty good and very popular. And I had friends, my friend who was like listening to Fugazi and Minor Threat all the time would go to PC Plaza down the street and play Army of One or whatever the fuck it was called.
I think it was called something like that. Yeah. But you would be better off playing fucking Final Fantasy, which at least like train you to be an eco-terrorist or something of value.
A red mage. Yeah. But I was really struck by how they don't just go join the army, which is like one of the only you can just show up and get a job opportunities left in the United States. They regard, Spencer's working at Jamba Juice and he's like, hey, what's that recruitment thing across the street? And like, weren't you the kid reading battle plans as like an 8-year-old? And then same with Scarlatos. He's like, will this data entry stuff help me with joining the military? It's like, motherfucker, you can just join the military. Like what?
Well, Spencer is too fat and lazy, we learn, right? Because when he says he wants to join, Sadler's like, all right, man, we know that you're too fat and that you never commit to anything.
Right. Yeah. You
and then we have the incredible training montage, which just feels like it's cut out of order.
Well, yeah, and it's set to the Imagine Dragons song Believer, but we never even get the lyrics. Yeah. Like he's so far from having any hope of any kind of future. I mean, John, and you're
also in like the third shot of the training montage, he's like deadlifting 415 pounds.
Right.
Like, what? Like
exactly
I like aspire to that shit.
Exactly like Chris Kyle, the American Sniper.
Yeah.
I had a coworker when I worked at a hotel. Don't want to say his name, but he was also a immigrant who had been in the U.S.
Marriott.
That's right. Yeah. Immigrant who had been in the U.S. Armed Forces. And basically every morning he would come to the hotel's gym to work out and listen to this exact stuff. And I know that because I would go to the changing room and it would like play from his iPhone, basically. Super nice guy. Right. But he was listening to this exact stuff, which is grind set bordering on, at least in his case, fascism, like protect your neighborhood stuff, right? Where it's saying like, you are the one, you are the wall, you are what stands against. And it's sort of like, man.
I mean, these guys are...
I am the instrument of God's peace.
These guys are... Yeah, exactly. There's this repeated, the St. Francis prayer, which is like, Lord, like, make me an instrument of thy peace where there is whatever, where there's harmony, or where there's confusion, let me be an instrument of harmony. It's like, let me stand against the disorder as the one agent of order and good in the world.
Like but Francois Hollande says, like being, standing up for humanity, being this this force for good.
These guys I know these guys.
Yeah, me too. I know a guy who looks at the National Guard on his computer, just like it was a webpage that you could check. Like it says something new each day. You just look at the National Guard website.
Like Yahoo News. To see a Clint Eastwood movie where the characters say things, they use like the dangling though. Like I can't believe we made it to Europe though. Like and they say things like I'm about to go to sleep. Like just
all of the vacation dialogue is incredible to me.
God, it reminded me of the scene in Dirty Work, the Norm Macdonald movie, where he's pretending to be in a frat and he like calls the house. He's like, "Okay, there, dude." Like, it's like, yes, here is like a Xerox of a Xerox of how guys talk when nobody's around.
They have nothing to say. Like, there's a moment where I guess we can skip to your vacation section for a little bit, but there's a part where they're at the Trevi Fountain, and like halfway through the Trevi Fountain sequence, one of them says, "I can't believe we made it, the Trevi Fountain." They've been there for like 10 minutes.
But that is That is true. It is a Xerox of a Xerox,
I know.
but it circles back to being real. This is the fascinating part, because I do think that the screenwriter lays down some clunkers, and we've seen clunkers
first time,
in Clint Eastwood
we should
movies.
say first time. and
Dorothy Bathalis.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Her name is Dorothy Bliscoll. She is a first time and so far one time screenwriter who's been she was like a production assistant on a couple Clint movies before this, and whatever. She's
batting 1,000, which not many screenwriters.
Sure,
can say.
absolutely. She's the Charles Lawton of screenwriting.
Exactly. I mean, she has some lines which are truly intro to screenwriting class thing, where they tell you, do not say a complete grammatical sentence where a normal person would say 4 words, right?
Yeah.
But she also recreates this like non-conversation conversation that people have on vacation, particularly people who have been socialized not to be able to communicate. There's like a pseudo fight where Stone wants to keep moving and Sadler wants to stay, and neither of them can really like just express their feelings. They're sort of like half joking at each other. It was, I just my mouth was open. It was so perfect.
There's a moment where when they first get to Venice, where they're clearly just like tired. It's like a very familiar vacation, like both of our feet hurt, kind of snipping at each other. And Stone says, do you want to, whatever. He says, are you sure? Do you even know? And Sadler says, I don't even know, man. Like they're repeating each other's phrasing because they have so little to actually say. And these are the guys who've known each other forever.
Yeah, the scene that I think about like that is when they go to the nightclub in Amsterdam, and then it cuts to them the next morning sitting at like the most barren table ever. Yeah. Just being like, damn, last night was the craziest night of the whole trip, but today I'm hungover though.
Yeah.
It's like,
and then the other guy's like, me too, like I'm so hungover. And they've already said that like 2 hours earlier. Yeah.
But it does feel true though. Like when we talk about this movie, like, whether it's despite itself or what, reflecting the banality of like middle American interiors and upholstery, about like how guys of that age interact. Like it reminded me of that classic Onion article that's like 80% of roommates are so hungover today, where it's like, when you are 21, like that's what you talk to your buddies about.
That's all you
like
have to say.
How hungover you are.
Well,
you have no life experience.
It's funny, and it really like struck me as because the movie takes place in this barren, futureless America that we are all familiar with, and their big thing that they're going to go do is they go to Europe to look at it, and like that's what I did as well.
With a selfie stick,
selfie stick. I can't believe we made it to Europe. Like I can. You just buy a ticket and you go, and like they're going to see things. They keep talking about how they're there to like meet women, but they never do. They look up the skirt of the Italian hostel woman who's telling them about. And
they're like, "Damn, I'm gonna like Italy though."
Excursion. Yeah,
it's a combination of like really nasty objectification and also weird Christian innocence at the same time, which I think is really great.
And but like that is kind of what you do. Like you Spencer, even his one moment of real insight where he talks about how he feels like life is catapulting him towards something. He then later brushes that off as saying like, I was just on that European high.
Yeah. And Sadler's so uncomfortable with this like expression of sincere feeling, or like his attempt to form a coherent bit of analysis that he says like, give me a hit of that stuff, man. Whatever you're smoking.
Yeah, is that a cigarette you're smoking? Yeah.
But that is itself. I mean, there is the scene where that guy's like, you have to go to Amsterdam and do truffles. Which are like psychedelic mushrooms. He's like, I like to do truffle and ride my bike and do nothing.
He says like, I take mushrooms and I go do nothing. I go look in the forest. I go look at the birds, and like they go to Europe, and it's funny because they're like these kind of the type of middle American guys who you would think would be totally hostile to any kind of continental different way of seeing things, but like they are enriched, like they are they're interacting with a culture with like a history and a sense of place, and this man who's like, you should go appreciate the world for its own sake.
But even that is a cliche. Like the way that Spencer is talking about it, like this is why I love it. It's like it might as like the shit that he's saying might as well come stamped on the back of the Eurail pass. Like that whole idea where it's like, you're communing with an ancient world, and you think of like life and higher ideas. It's like when fucking Carmela Soprano goes to Paris, she actually has a more deeper, she's a fictional character, emotionally enriching experience than like these guys do. Like if they had not been on this train when this terrorist attack happened, they would have been three of a zillion people who had a totally identical, literally on the rails style grand tour through Europe, where you take your selfies, you see the sights, and you dine out on it in your memory for the rest of your life while you raise your shit-heel kids who can't stand you.
But I think you guys are both right, because the real tragedy of it for me is that if they hadn't gone to Europe, they would have been less enriched, and also their enrichment is the most manufactured, comes in the package type of thing you're talking about, right? Where that is how limited their worldview is that this is an expansion, and it's nothing, right?
It's like buying a suitcase with the postcards like already lacquered onto it.
I always think about this because I do like to travel when I can, but it's like I think about the way that like someone like Anthony Bourdain like reshaped the world of travel, where it's like his spirit about it of like, meeting people and like getting off the beaten path and blah, blah, blah. But now the thing is like, well, you got off the beaten path and you know where all the best restaurants and bars are. So I'll just go to those. Yeah. And you go to those places and they all have a fucking picture of Anthony Bourdain because he's like a saint. Because some shitheel dive bar is now a tourist attraction. 10 other
people your exact age with their copy of No Reservations in their backpack.
Exactly. Because like, especially as like an American or a foreign tourist in Europe, you are the commodity of the tourism industry. You know, you are the audience to whom this experience is sold and reified. And like part of that reification is like the desperate attempt to make it seem profound or quote authentic. So the thing that I love about this is like, again, like these guys are basically on the fucking It's a Small World After All version of like a European holiday, and they love it, as most people do. Like they're not after anything. The biggest debate they have is if they should go to Paris or not because they hear that Parisians are too rude. Now, which you have to go to Europe to hear that French people are too rude. It's like a global cliche.
Ian, it's time for you to check your email. I sent Ian an email that says do not open until 15-17.
He's done this before, one other time. Well, this is the Jersey Boys episode.
Okay. I believe so.
Okay, here we go.
Will you open the email, please?
Do not open until 15-17 episode. Your display name will be the King of the Rood.
I got him.
King of the Rood.
Yeah, the Spencer says, I've heard the French are the king of
the
Rood.
Doesn't matter that you guessed this. It's incredible, but you can't take away. It's a wonderful song. Look, I want to quote very, very quickly here. Someone once said, I found neither psychology nor analysis in it. The substance of the book seemed usable. It could be sieved. Now, this is Bresson talking about the novel upon which Mouchette is based. And I think it maps exactly onto this film to say, I found neither psychology nor analysis in the experience of these gentlemen, which is why it makes for perfect text, right? I think Bresson and Eastwood, I'm sure people have talked about them together, right? It's sort of the obvious comparison when you're talking about non-professional actors in a film. But it's a wonderful contrast because obviously Bresson, you have this guy who was like allergic to the use of emotive music, which Clint Eastwood is sometimes allergic. And then at the end of this film, we get a really, to me, terrible employment of it. And he also gets somebody who's so opposed to artifice in acting, but he removed it by only employing non-professional actors and making them repeat their lines like 100 times or something. Borderline dehumanizing.
Yeah, like a Kubrickian thing where it's like your motions are now just automated.
Exactly.
At this point,
exactly.
And both masters of transcendental style, I think, Eastwood and Bresson.
It's true.
Absolutely.
Yep.
This movie is nothing if not an exaltation of the notion of grace in human experience.
Exactly. I was speaking of a mule. I was thinking about Balthazar throughout this film because it's such a similar document of looking at the world and kind of taking a perspective of somebody who doesn't understand it in the way that we want them to understand it, and just sort of like forcing.
So Spencer Stone is like
I
the
am kind of saying that, but respectfully, because I think both of them are extremely. They elicit such
compelling.
They elicit such compassion, at least for me, where like I have so much empathy for this like creature struggling in the world.
That's so funny. This is like Skolimowski's EO, where it's like, how does this thing see the world?
I gotta give it up for Clint saying they don't make faces like this. They never made a face like Spencer Stone's before or since.
I totally disagree. I feel like this is like, I mean, besides the fact that they I feel like I know 10 guys that look like Spencer
He has a
Stone.
Rappaportian quality,
which maybe big head. Yeah.
Maybe he got the taste when Rappaport was in Sully. There's something here. Now Rappaport's on that Spencer Stone tip, touring out Tel Aviv or whatever the fuck he's doing.
Jesus Christ, yeah. So we haven't talked about Spencer's sort of reverse Chris Kyle experience, where he is flunking out of various specializations in the Air Force. I think if it wasn't obviously definitely true to life, it would be way too on the nose that he is without depth perception. Like he's literally like can only see two axes.
Yep.
Yeah. But he's like, I wonder if it's even like more painful for him to relive, or I guess I would expect that it'd be more painful for him to relive these humiliations where like there's an active shooter alert when he's in. Well, first he can't do the pararescue thing because he doesn't have depth perception. And then
we get the most acted scene in the film on his part, I think, or like the most emotive scene in the film when he goes home and talks to Judy Greer.
You can't appeal it. Yeah.
Right.
And then he's learning like triage, like field medicine or something.
1401.
Yeah. And he fucks that up. He like tries to, shoves a stint into someone's brain, just killing them instantly. And then there's the active shooter thing where he gets up to like and stands next to the door with a ballpoint pen like an action star, and they all ask him like,
would be so embarrassing to see in real life. Can you imagine the person doing this?
And especially because like if there was a shooter, the guy would just come in, get a pen, and be like, fucking blow his head off instantly. But his excuse was just like, like the thesis statement for like a lot of these recent movies, which is, in short, I don't want people to know that I died a pussy or whatever.
Exactly.
Or like, oh no, he says, I don't want people to know that I died cowering under a desk.
Exactly. And then you get another, like the gelato scene is much maligned by people who don't get this movie because nothing of any import happens in it. And
so wrong.
I totally get it because like that is
same deal with life.
And that would be a huge deal to them, to these guys. Like going to the gelato place is one of the most exciting things that happen in their lives.
With the woman that you kind of met spontaneously, they're living their like little Linklater moment of this is like the highest high.
Yeah. But
they should do like Before Sunset where it's just like Spencer Stone and
nobody
a woman.
talks about anything.
90 minutes of like, oh, I'm from Sacramento. Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's so crazy. 3 Californians and Italy.
I'm also I'm also American. Oh man, that's crazy. Just never getting anything for that.
I do think there's something about these, like Spencer Stone being a 6'4" man from Northern California whose life sort of kicks into gear in Italy, which is
Clint's
and yet he's also like he's got even less charisma than Scott Eastwood. Like he's just, there's nothing going on when you look at this guy.
I don't know. Spencer Stone has a star quality,
Well, I think he has what's interesting is of the 3, he is the guy who is trying to act, and he still comes in like way under the radar in terms of how much he is able to express what is going on with him.
In the behind the scenes stuff, he has so much more energy and more like he's at least, you can tell he's trying to crack wise, like he's trying to be funny. And in this, he has that school shooter quality that you've mentioned, John. Like he's clearly full of unexpressible frustration, and his head is always like, his chin is always up a little bit, and he just like, he looks coiled in some way, and we watch him like fail out of all these different like exciting parts of the Air Force, where it's interesting because he seems like he's the only one in the military who's been infected with this I must be a hero ideology, which I like, everybody else seems like such a jobber,
Yeah, they're like playing ping pong, and they're like when he's in Portugal, he's like, oh, this is so easy, but I'm excited to get put on real duty. It's like, who? Yeah, I mean, I guess he wants to, right? But I feel like most people who join the military, it's like, I just want to do the easiest shit and like get my college fund or whatever it is.
When he's Skyping with Scarlatos, and he's saying like, but you're over in Afghanistan, man. Like, and Scarlatos is like, no, ISIS is the bad guys now. Like, I'm not even in like the real shit.
I liked that a lot. Yeah. The fact that like that's the extent of their historical analysis. The same guys who get scolded later for thinking that Hitler was in the eagle's nest surrounded by Americans when he's taken down.
Amazing scene where like the German like Berlin bike tour guide is like, you Americans try to take credit for everything, but actually it was the communists who killed Hitler and saved the world. Anyways, off we go.
They don't know how to react. They're like, like,
do you guys know? Also, weren't you guys psychotically obsessed with World War II? Your kids, you think that Hitler was in the eagle's nest and the American army? Everyone knows he was in the Führer bunker, and that's why the Soviets won Berlin.
Do you guys know about the Führer boba? There's a boba place that recently opened, like in the parking lot, that is now because they just like paved over the Führer bunker because they don't want neo-Nazis to visit. But there's like a boba place that's opened basically within the like the site of the former Führer bunker. So there is now, you can get Führer boba. I don't think they call attention to that. I don't think they call it that or put like schnapps in it or whatever. But I remember I've been to Berlin a couple of times, and the first time was probably over 10 years ago now. And there was nothing there at that time. Like you're saying, they don't want to make it a site that people go to. Like there wasn't even the plaque that they show when I went. Yeah. That's funny though. It's like dumping Osama bin Laden's remains at sea, allegedly. Yeah. They're in Europe. They meet up with Scarlatos. They go to the nightclub. I think in your review, John, you talked about the pleasure of imagining Clint Eastwood directing this nightclub sequence.
I believe you called it a bump and grind scene, which I like. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, like sadly, that's the kind of shit that I think would fall to second unit.
Yeah.
But you know, Clint Eastwood swimming in a golf shirt, like just walking through a club like that. Yeah. Like, I almost wish they went to one of those like Berlin clubs with dark rooms and all that stuff. Right. You know? Seeing Clint like mosey through that in his slacks would just, you know, but this is like
guys in mesh t-shirts.
When you talk about a movie being like this sort of kind of docu-fiction hybrid, to me, at least half of the pleasure of making the movie is of watching the movie is imagining it being made.
Yes.
You know, like imagining Eastwood telling Urkel what to do. I don't know. It makes me happy.
That's the famous weirdness of like Nanook of the North and stuff, right? Where you get a white guy telling a person, was it in Flaherty or whatever? Telling a man to not just act out, because I think famously some of the practices he told him to do were also like ancestral practices that he didn't even were not used anymore. But telling somebody to do at least some of the things they actually did, right? And sort of like forcing them. You're right. It's such a fascinating image to say like, okay, now like dance with her. Okay, now try dancing with her, but like she doesn't like it that much. And you know, it's like it is the thing that occurred, but with the weirdness of intentionality. You even get it
like when they're about to get on the fateful train, Sadler asks Scarlatos to take a candid picture of him. Like he does this posed candid photo.
Yeah.
I just wanted to read from our friend here who put it so beautifully. He says, "This is very much what 1517 is, an immersive 3D rendered selfie which arrests real-world historical figures in the glistening amber of cinema." Now that's John Semley on the 1517 to Paris.
Damn.
Yeah, that review, oh man, I can't believe I used to write like this.
Oh man, I thought that was so nice.
No, I stand by the observations. I just think it's like, I feel like at the time I was so into like positioning Eastwood in some way or like really redeeming these films when I came out, where I felt like I really had to like state my case. Where now I feel like it's easier to just plainly be like, the 1517 rules, and if you don't think so, you're a fucking dunce.
Well, I mean, A.O. Scott says that the film is concerned with locating the precise boundary between the banal and the extraordinary. And like, I think that's exactly right. And that's what is so thrilling about casting these men, is that no actor could portray this much boringness. Like no one could be this normal, as normal as these guys, like trying to be themselves.
And there's a way in which, I mean, and again, this might be like over pleading the case too, but it's like, this is like a $30 million February experimental film for Warner Brothers, you know, that is like essentially plotless, that is this weird kind of hangout movie with non-actors that is consistently rides a line between being like tedious and like hysterically baffling. But in true Clint style, I think it
did almost
doubled the budget. Ergo is a great success.
We haven't released our Sully episode with Nick Newman, but he
great
talked
guest
about
and man.
Yes, he's love that Mr. Newman. He, I think, helped me to understand the late style Clint in sort of articulating that there's this surrealism that comes from the plainness and this kind of like, you can't provenance the surrealism. You can't, who knows if Clint knows what kind of frisson he's generating, but there is such a, like, this is an avant-garde film in many ways. Like it really challenges you while being ostensibly like just a cynical, get the red states out to the movies kind of premise.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say that stylistically, the thing that his late movies remind me of the most is like Eastbound and Down, like the Jody Hill, Danny McBride TV shows, like especially Richard Jewell. They all have this like really attuned eye to just like how banal and in the sort of Hill McBride style grotesque, just like America is at a nuts and bolts level, the interiors of restaurants, how people dress, this sort of like image of a kind of boardwalk slobbishness that just like is everywhere in the nation, that I don't know, their shows, to me, they aesthetically feel like America, but like the difference is their gaze on it is like caustic and cynical and mean-spirited. When Clint is showing a bunch of fucking fatzos and flip-flops doing the Macarena in Richard Jewell, like, he thinks it's great, you know? But his vision of them is like just as, and like not even despairing, but just as frank and accurate, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the aforementioned Will Sloan, who will never appear on this podcast, he puts it very succinctly in his Letterboxd review of this film, which I recommend. He says, the America of Clint's post-American Sniper output is an America of shitty bungalows and cheap apartments and ugly strip malls and crumbling Legion halls, all shot in a very matter-of-fact style that doesn't rub your nose in ugliness but doesn't manufacture any prettiness for you either. And a little later he says, who else is giving you a scene at a Jamba Juice in Sacramento? This is, I remember watching Good Time and thinking, like, there are those hideous, the specific quality of light that you see in like a gas station at night that's selling you boner pills, or like the quality of the silent radio thing on a truck selling tortas. Other American filmmakers shy away from that, and in that film the Safdies lean into it. In these Clint Tom Stern films, he really leans into the, like, they're wearing awful shorts because they were.
They go to the to receive the Legion of Honor in like really bad polos. And I want to reflect your Will Sloan quote. Ebert said of Bresson also, the actors portray lives without informing us how to feel about them, forced to decide for ourselves how to feel, forced to empathize. We often have stronger feelings than if the actors were feeling them for us. I think that's the exact same quality that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's like neorealism.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other famous instance of just, trying to capture people in their milieu and let that speak for itself, and trying to downplay basically any element that would walk you towards what you're supposed to be feeling about it.
I think it's probably time for us to get on the 1517 to Paris, but
let's do it.
Right before this, as they're getting on, we get this moment where they jump in to help an old man get on the train and like carry his bags, which is the kind of heroism that you don't see from a Chris Kyle. Like the thing that I thought was missing in American Sniper, the thing that unfortunately like you kind of only get from. I remember one of my sister's friends from college from high school went to VMI, the Virginia Military Institute. I went to high school in Northern Virginia, and he was just, he was some fucking guy who would drink Dr. Pepper in our basement and play ping pong or whatever. And then he comes back from his first like semester at VMI, and he's standing straighter than I've ever seen anyone. He like shook my stepdad's hand when he came in the door. Like he's been. This is the only place where, unfortunately, like they do instill a certain level of, I don't know, civic mindedness that goes with the bloodlust and the proficient murder of brown people for the in the interests of empire. But like there is that kind of help old ladies across the street thing that you get too.
Yeah, it's tied up, I agree with you, with the worst instincts in the world, basically. But it is a sense of humility and like service to others that, you know, is genuinely aspirational. And I hate to do the thing that movie reviewers do where they will pick a line and say like, oh, you must have improvised this or whatever. But the guy who plays the older British gentleman who says thank you about 20 times, that really got me, because it is such like an older man thing to do when you have to lean on somebody to, you like say thank you so many times that it's clearly an excess. Like you're, you know, such a expression of like humiliation or something. But I don't know. It really,
it does come back because wonderful. In that moment where Scarlatos runs into the other car with the Kalashnikov and everyone's scared, the like daughter of this old man says, no, he's a good guy. He's one of the good guys.
Yeah.
So we're on the train. Yeah. First of all, Clint decided, I'm not building a set. I'm shooting on the train while it's moving. And so they're going 160 miles an hour on this train. They have to stick to the Thalys schedule. Like I think they must have bought out the whole train or something, but in order to make room on the track for the other trains that don't have a movie shooting on them, like it had to stop for the exact amount of time that it normally would. And so whenever they wanted to shoot at a station, they had like 11 minutes to shoot and then get back on the train before it left. Just like, oh, wow. I mean, the man he's not lazy. Like he's doing his own weird specific thing and doing the hard parts that he wants to. But like, that's just crazy to me. So they get on the train. Weirdly, they seem to like have first class tickets, but they don't find the first class car or something.
Or I thought they just snuck into first class at one point.
That was my interpretation.
Because the Wi-Fi is better.
They want the Wi-Fi to post the selfies, And then
exactly.
Mike Magoulian? So Mark Magoulian, who is he with his wife, they're sitting like closest to this bathroom, and he says in the behind the scenes stuff, he's like a American born but like a French citizen, and apparently he took this train all the time. And so he noticed that somebody was in the bathroom longer than he never noticed someone be in that bathroom before.
With his suitcase. Yeah. And I just want to draw attention to a wonderful bit of editing, because we talked about how it throughout the film is sort of like throwing forward to the event, but in kind of to be a little bit crass, like blue ballsy way, right? Sort of like, you know, preventing you from being too invested in the climax of this. And then when they're on this train, there's a wonderful cut where they cut to basically like right up to where we had seen before. I love that they didn't replay the Magoulian action, right? There's sort of like a respect for your intelligence of skipping ahead to where we were, which I think was great.
The door opens and the guy who's played by just like a Italian American guy, just an actor. He comes out with his shirt off and his backpack on his front, like he's pretending he's pregnant. And Magoulian rushes out and grabs his wife and says, "Get out of here, it's serious."
Yeah.
Which is the kind of like not articulated enough thing you would say when you're on like filled with adrenaline. Yeah. Great.
And now we have to talk about, I mean, we've mentioned the school shooter aspect of the three leads, but I mean, this is another parallel like American Sniper, right? Where we're getting another school shooter type guy, basically. I mean, this is what is so fascinating to me about characterizing it as terrorism, as Francois Hollande does later in the film, because in a certain sense it is, in that it's a vaguely political act related to Western intervention in Syria in 2014, but it also seems like such a case of a guy who, you know, is basically like a lone gunman type guy. Right. Is sort of maybe just motivated more by the things that lone gunmen are motivated by, right? This sort of purposelessness that you're talking about, this desire to do something historically good or famous. Yeah, just
depending on where you're born and how much melanin you have, you're attracted to a different ideology that tells you like you can make history.
Exactly. Yep.
Well, yeah, and I think there is kind of like, I mean, it says the character, like the attacker, is not a character really at all.
Which is a real choice.
But I mean, Yeah, I mean, there is a way where it's like American Sniper tries to do like the mirroring with the rival sniper,
Juba.
which is as close as it gets to like affording sympathy to the other side.
Yeah, it's called Mustafa in that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But wasn't the real guy? He was like, yeah, like we said, his excuse was like, I found all these guns in a suitcase and then I saw a YouTube video, so I thought I would do this. I was like a homeless guy.
He changed his story and was sort of like, okay, no, actually, this was like, this was an expression of jihad where I was watching YouTube videos. He watched, like the last thing he did before he left the bathroom was watch a similar to Spencer Stone style motivation video pumping him up.
He was a guy who like lived his whole life in Spain. Basically, he was born in Morocco and lived almost his entire life in Spain on the fringes of like poverty. Like so he's like these guys, sort of alienated from like where history is happening, and then kind of seizes his chance.
But he was like also security flagged basically by Interpol or something right? Because he had been watching these videos and made some comments at his mosque or something about violent activism. So again, I think you're right, Jake, where, you know, this is not to say I think attacking people on a train with an extremely vague political statement is horrible, and I'm glad that this guy was stopped. But it's impossible not to appreciate that this is also just kind of like something that is really attractive to the European imagination, because it is this like young, you know, a picture of immigration, of scary Islamic man.
This is exactly why immigration is dangerous, despite this guy being like having lived in Spain for like 30 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And they hate all the classical culture that these guys have been breezing through.
Of course.
You know, all these things that Anthony Sadler has captured in his hundreds of selfies are despised by the jihadist masses.
Exactly.
You know?
They hate hazelnut gelato.
Yeah.
So, and he comes into the car, his gun jams, and weirdly they seem to know. I mean, Spencer is also on the aisle, but like Scarlato says, "Spencer, go!" Like he sort of sicks Spencer on him like a German shepherd.
I don't know. I think that is kind of like military mindset, though, right? Of like waiting for order, like you're primed.
Well, and then
basically.
he just explodes. Like, and our friend Aaron from Hit Factory wrote a really great piece on this movie recently on Letterboxd, but said that to his mind, like these guys they are entirely wooden and like laughably inept actors until this moment where they're recreating this thing, and then they seem like it's so stylish. They're perfect for it.
Yeah, but it's also like so underplayed, which I want to highlight, because it truly is like 30 seconds of the movie, and people complained about that at the time. The reviews were all like, you know, this is what happens when you have to pad an event. They could have made this like a whole action sequence.
Yeah, well, we talked about this with Sully as well, where like you're trying to concoct a story around a fascinating like 45-second incident.
Structurally, Sully does a similar thing where it's sort of like it has these little breadcrumbs of it, right? So it's almost as if like the move, to the extent that it's a deliberate structural choice or just something. I mean, it's obviously a deliberate structural choice, but or just something where it's like kind of reminding the fucking slob viewers at home that like, don't worry, this thing is going to happen. We're gonna get there. I don't really know, but I mean, I do think it is legitimately thrilling. I mean, I don't like to fall back on that, because it's like with American Sniper, people are like, say what you will, he knows how to shoot a sniper shootout in a sandstorm, which is like very difficult to telegraph. It's like, I don't know. I don't think you need to like defend that movie on the basis of, you know, one scene. But talk about Paul Greengrass, like this is where it gets into like weird kind of like un-Clintian jittery cinematography and like even the grisliness of like the guy getting shot, or the like
thumb cut.
His head, the back of his head getting
carved up, and all that stuff.
So upsetting.
Totally.
And then Scarlato's hitting him with the butt of hitting the attacker with the butt of the rifle over and over again. The part where El Kazani puts his pistol to Spencer Stone's head and pulls the trigger is like so upsetting. Yeah. And we also we get these shots from El Kazani's point of view of the rifle butt and of like Scarlatos' face that are really upsetting. The thing I thought about was another work from the, you know, from the mid 2010s, this Obama era of an alienating and like intentionally abrasive work by an established artist. Of course, I'm talking about Yeezus. But like the Kanye album where you're listening through the whole thing and it's like keeps deliberately like inserting samples like off rhythm,
right?
And it's all this Detroit house stuff that he's never done before,
like taking
and like
momentum away.
The lyrics are so off-putting. He keeps invoking like civil rights movement metaphors to talk about his own like sexual conquests, and then at the end he drops in Bound 2, which is just like the classic sped up soul sample thing that he's done before to remind you like, by the way, I could have done this the whole time, but I was doing the other stuff on purpose. It's the same thing with the train sequence where you're like, Clint could have made the whole movie an action film and decided not to, but he's just reminding you, I still have it.
And even the action,
but I mean, is Clint even known for being like a thrilling director of action sequences? Like even in the movies with great ones, like the Iger section, the last one we talked about, they're shot in the same sort of like stately, controlled, economical way that the rest of the film is.
I guess maybe I'm saying more like I could have made this recognizable as a Hollywood film.
Not style necessarily. And then even
like it could have been United 93 on train tracks, basically.
And I think even after that, right, the majority of the climax is focused on like the aftermath of it, which I also think is wonderful, right? Again, they move past the confrontation so quickly. Just enough to show you, like you're saying, Jake, I could have done this. Of course, this is like an important moment in the discussion, but to have an eye to, like you're saying, Scarlettus going into the other cars and the trauma that those people experience believing that the killer's coming in.
I think that people are notably more scared when Sadler comes in, even though he doesn't have a gun because he's brown.
Right.
And then you do Spencer gets this moment of redemption where he takes his shirt off to
another parallel.
Try
Shirts off, boys.
Stop the wound. Well, and also like taking your shirt off is the kind of thing that is it's very functional. Like it's I need some cloth, I need something to stop this bleeding, but like it is an inherently like sort of humiliating move. And then he comes out of the train like shirtless, covered in blood, and the guy's bleeding out of his neck, just like the dummy that Stone couldn't save. And he figures out that he has to literally put his fingers into, because like the bullet had severed an artery, so he literally puts his fingers into the wound, and he asks the guy, do you want to say a prayer? Like the teacher had suggested, and he's like, no, I'm not going. Like I'm not dying.
Well,
so
there's also
I'm not going to say a prayer.
Sort of like European reaction to American Christianity of, no, like he's like busy. He's like, he can't do that right now. Sort of trying to be polite. He also gets the most conventional maybe payoff in the film in the form of being able to use his jujitsu for good, of course. Which I related to immensely.
Well, but we even get that scene of him being shitty at BJJ, which is really like anti-heroic in a way that is
the best BJJ
thrilling
scene I've ever seen on film. I will say, extremely true to life about how kind of fun and also embarrassing it is at the same time.
I also want to shout out like the actual ending when they get the French Legion of Honor medals, because it is where like the film sort of like that experimental / theoretical jump inside the TV thing comes to fruition, where like it is literally intercutting between their own media images from French TV at the time and them in reenactments accepting these medals.
With the same clothes on.
Yes, as if the two are totally interchangeable, except in some of it, like Judy Greer is your mom, you know, who, by the way, doesn't age, even though the characters are 15 years older. But
no offense, big glow up for Spencer Stone's mom. Gotta say.
Totally. But I mean, that is the thing where it's like, okay, you have this kind of fiction thread and you have this like realism thread, and here is where they're finally totally like braided together in this like totally strange way. And it's like, it's interesting because I've always hated in biopics when they do the thing in the credits where they show the real people, because it feels like a
we've talked about this on the show. I specifically said I love that. I think it should be required by law.
No, I hate it because it's like, it's so cheap to be like, well, Christian Bale actually looks like this guy you see, therefore the performance was good. But like this idea where it's like, I mean, they are literally the same people.
Yes. Yeah. And yet they do kind of look different because of course time has passed, and now I think they all look like a little bit more camera ready. And of course the injury is like more makeup department to his eye. And then you also get real Francois Hollande and actor Francois Hollande like trading off
the guy
with each other.
Who looks like the back of Francois Hollande.
But the idea that they substitute each other, I mean, to get back to like the classic, like to talk about the Westerns, like the Liberty Valance, like print the legend thing.
Yeah.
Here, it's like you have created, I mean, not literally, but theoretically, a one-to-one map to territory production, which is probably as banal, as exciting, as plain, etc., as like the actual fucking backpacking trip through Europe punctuated by a terrorist attack that they did. So that idea that like in our culture, the mythological filmic version substitutes for history. In this one, it does, but it feels like, you know, Indiana Jones putting the weight on the thing and it being more or less right, you know, like like you have created like a fairly accurate, like Tussauds wax museum version of these three fucking random guys' lives.
This is like that thing on where like Ellen would go to the wax museum and hold still and pretend she was a wax figure and then scare the tourists.
Well,
it's like,
it's funny that you say that.
Shared a parking lot with Clint Eastwood.
That's true. It also reminds me that you guys know Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin, this famous film, which also used kind of like docudrama techniques in kind of the opposite direction. Some of those Scotsmen hitting on Scarlett Johansson were real Scotsmen who thought they just saw like a pretty lady. Exactly. Yeah, and then it was like hidden camera stuff. But it's like the photographic inverse of this, what you're talking about, John, where it's like it is people who all know that this is happening, and somehow instead of like using hidden camera techniques to capture like more realism, more power, using the real people ends up like correctly capturing the lack of emotion in the scene, like correctly recreating the emptiness of the event instead of trying to heighten with, you know,
I want to talk about the cops a little bit because they do something so fascinating where they're holding, first of all, in the behind the scenes stuff, all three of the guys call him Ayub. They refer to him by his first name. I don't know if that's because they have trouble pronouncing the last name, but it does sound like he's like one of their buddies who was on their trip with them. Yeah. But when they're holding him down, they say, "Stop resisting."
They do.
Which I wonder, I wonder if that's something that the Army teaches you, or if that's just something they learned from like watching cop movies. Great question. Course, this whole thing reminded me of the murder of Jordan Neely on the subway in New York by the U.S. Marine veteran who was also like...
Well, that is the parallel story. This is like the real... I mean, it's confusing because both stories are real, but this is like the truth to what a lot of these hero primed people will end up doing. So sorry, go ahead. Tell us what happened.
Where this guy, he's like, I think he ended up being like the nephew of like the police commissioner or something, but this white guy basically saw a Jordan Neely who would perform on the subway as a Michael Jackson impersonator. He determined that this man was making too much noise or having a incident of a mental health crisis, and determined that he needed to protect the sanctity of the train by choking him to death, and murders him in front of a bunch of people. And it's exactly what happens in this, except that he is simply perceiving a threat where there is none whatsoever.
Well, it's like a stop clock mentality. Yeah. Like it's like, in this case, these guys did stop a version of a terrorist attack from playing out. But in 99% of cases, you're just choking out a mentally ill person on a train.
Exactly. Well, and also I would argue that bringing only 300 rounds onto a train from Amsterdam to Paris is a mentally ill act in itself. I disapprove of it, but I think there's certainly mental illness at play in this situation as well. And then I thought about this because the film, after the midway into the credits, we get a shot from we get footage from the actual sort of hero parade back in Sacramento, which is its own very painful reminder that after they get the French Legion of Honor, they have to go and live in Sacramento, California again.
Even old Lady Bird got out of there.
Exactly. This is the same time period as Lady Bird, by the way. Like they were in school.
Imagine Spencer Stone was in Lady Bird.
Spencer Stone.
Instead of he could play like the Lucas Hedges
I was going to say
he
wouldn't make the cut for the play because he's a failure. But anyway, the cops. Yeah, there's a moment in these shots of the victory parade in Sacramento where a motorcycle cop rolls by, and it immediately occurred to me they're not like superhero protectors now.
Mm-hmm.
Like they,
sure.
even as they return to Sacramento, they still are not able to. They're not able to save anyone in any situation now. Like they had their one moment where they were in exactly the right place to be heroes and to get personal phone calls from Barack Obama or whatever.
Well, not to chuckle at it, but wasn't Spencer Stone literally subsequently stabbed in Sacramento?
He was.
Because a guy was making fun of some woman that he was with, and he got like jumped and stabbed multiple times.
Like 9 times. He had to have emergency open heart surgery.
Oh my God.
And then, so what I think is interesting is that Clint doesn't go Flags of Our Fathers on these guys. Like we don't see
aftermath,
any of the aftermath where Alex Scarlatos immediately, like before the movie, immediately goes on Dancing with the Stars, places third behind Bindi Irwin and Nick Carter from the Backstreet Boys, and then runs a series of failed but almost made it campaigns for various local and state elected positions in Oregon. And then Spencer and Anthony, well, they all go on Kimmel and stuff, and they get a free Chevy convertible, and then they went on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I think, in like a celebrity edition.
And Spencer was in some military zombie movie that came out.
He was in a military zombie movie that mostly stars the employees of a company that makes military clothing.
Nice.
And then Spencer and Anthony were on the season of The Amazing Race that was interrupted by COVID, and by the time they could start filming again, they both had other commitments, and so they just couldn't come back to the show. Like, because Anthony got like a big promotion at work, and Spencer was in school for something. And then they were called back to France to testify in some kind of a court case in 2020, I think. And Spencer was mysteriously hospitalized and like couldn't testify. So they just had, like weird, non-exciting lives since, with kind of fairly sad. They become like any one of them could be unmasked on The Masked Singer. I feel like they're just people
the difference with Flags of Our Father is like Flags of the Father feels like a corrective to the notion of, maybe as that generation dies out, a generation of which Clint is a part, so I hope not too soon, like people will have a more kind of complicated view about like the role of America in the Second World War. And like people didn't necessarily just like come home and it was incredible and we were all heroes. Like people suffered and had shell shock and PTSD and blah, 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 blah. But I mean, I think with this, there's no other conclusion or feeling other than the fact that these guys will slip back into their same boring lives. And like, this was the thing. This is the story that they'll dine out on for the rest of their life, of which the movie is evidence, Well, now they have the movie, so they have 2 stories they can dine out on for the rest of their life.
I think that's the argument people would make if they thought the film was sort of like a traditional testament to heroism. They would say that it would be more truthful to include this like postscript stuff, right? But because I don't think the movie is doing that, it's much more effectively saying that this is like, they did believe this was going to happen to them. It happened to happen to them, but otherwise their life is generally like pretty textureless. So I don't know that we need that stuff, right? Because like you're saying, John, I don't know that it says something different than we already understood from if you're paying attention to the majority of the film.
And what I think is fascinating is that Clint has decided to use this story and these guys to try to articulate something about contemporary heroism.
Yeah.
And, John, in your review, you make sort of a joke, but use the term historical actors.
Yeah.
And like, they are, for a moment, able to have any effect on the world around them, despite the almost insurmountable difficulty of doing that in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
What a picture, huh?
Yeah, what a picture.
Yep.
Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, we've all talked about it. We've all made the joke. I know I would love to see Clint take one more shot at the sort of true life hero film and direct the George Santos story.
Oh, be brilliant.
Or another guy who's been railroaded.
Or someone made a joke about how like the perfect person, we're recording this on Jan 6th, like to make a Jan 6 movie would be Clint.
Ooh,
and
of course.
Who made this tweet? But like, it was like, it would be about a Capitol security guard who's a cop who bravely helps AOC get out of the building.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and maybe he's a Republican and he but he helps
But they put all aside.
John Boyega would be. I'm just imagining him as he's played several sort of complicated cop characters now. I was going to say to
horrible
end things,
Catherine Bigelow movie, Detroit.
Yes, Detroit. Yeah, very upsetting film. John, do you have any? Maybe a Canadian. Is there a Canadian story that you think Clint is the right man to tell?
He should do a movie about Canada's January 6th, which was the Ottawa trucker convoy.
Convoy? Yep. Yeah. Who's the lead, though? Who's the lead character, do we think?
I forget. It was basically a group of neo-Nazis. I don't know who their leaders are or anything like that. But he could play. Actually, this guy will probably become the next Prime Minister of Canada. It can be about Pierre Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre, yeah. I know this name from Michael and Us. I've heard... he's just like a total opportunist shill who now, because Justin Trudeau is so ineffectual and sitting duck, will probably end up becoming the Prime Minister of Canada. But he's a conservative who kind of rode the tiger of the trucker convoy to be these guys are right. Our freedoms are not being respected. It's what freedom? What the fuck are you talking about? Yeah.
Clint can make a trucker convoy movie. What are some other great Canadian moments? Oh, the G20 protests in Toronto when I lived there. There's a great video of a big fat guy trying to get into the mall, but it was closed because people were protesting the G20. So Clint could make a movie about that guy.
The mall guy.
Yeah.
I see past guests of the show, Jesse Hawken, tweeting about the two Michaels all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something they
were imprisoned in China for allegations. I didn't really follow this that closely.
That they were of spying or something.
They were Canadian spies. And then one of the Michaels recently threw the other Michael under the bus. It was you were a spy,
Really
the two Michaels are totally falling apart.
Yeah, we should Clint's two Michaels. Michael number 2 would maybe be a future one.
Is Juror number 2 not based on a true story?
I don't believe so.
It's from scratch.
Yeah.
And real quick, this is the end of Clint's journey with Tom Stern, at least so far.
The movie looked great. We didn't really talk about that aspect, but I thought it was shot very well.
It does. It's got a certain something. Also, the last hurrah for editor Blue Murray, because Joel Cox is back for The Mule and Cry Macho, and no editor yet has been announced for Juror number 2, but we're excited to see what happens there. And I think with that... Well,
I have some final thoughts.
Oh, yeah, please, Ian.
I wanted to shout out, of course, another monumental film in crossover reenactment docudrama, Battle of Algiers, which we haven't talked about at all.
Yes.
And I think the connection is particularly potent because, of course, Ennio Morricone does the music on that film. So to have Clint in close proximity to people who were actual historical agents and, were also kind of doing this strange fictional version of things. Several of them were actually in the Liberation Front. Some of them were paid actors, just acting alongside people, but not just in the American Sniper sense of this guy's an extra, but he was in Chris Kyle's unit. But these are leads in the film who were freedom fighters, and then also an actor from France or something. Well, I think whatever was a political activist or something, but. So I think that's another fascinating. I think that would be a great double feature to watch those two films in close proximity. Because I also think you get two visions of European anxiety about Northern African people.
North Africans,
And the other thing I was thinking about, because I read John's wonderful review, and he talks about Little Dieter Learns to Fly. And I was thinking of Grizzly Man as a object only because it is a film made of real footage that is also not it's another person's vision of an event, but using footage of the real person, right? Which I think is such a confusing way to interact with something. Not to say that we ever have access to an event itself, but to say that the real people are involved, but they are not necessarily the ones guiding us in how we see this thing, right? There's sort of a third presence,
and
in
also
the
in
relationship.
a true Herzogian fashion, makes himself the subject of it, in the sense that the climactic scene of the guy's death is withheld from the viewer because Herzog listens to it and is it is too unbearable to subject an audience to. It's fuck you. I can handle anything you can handle.
And as he would say, if he ever heard this podcast, you must never listen to this. You must put it away. Lock it in a vault.
Yeah.
And that's podcasting for me. Happy birthday to the show. that's about going to do it for this episode. Thank you, John, for joining us. Thank you for
my pleasure.
It's so
lending
great to
your
have you back here.
Expertise on this film. Is there anything you'd like to plug? You want to tell us about the podcast?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter, John Semley 3000, and I host a podcast called Slow Learners with my friend Asher Dark, where we read through like big books and talk about them and talk to guests about them. We're just like kind of wrapping up our first season, which is on Gravity's Rainbow.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. But then we might, if Gravity's Rainbow didn't seem difficult enough, we might do all of À la recherche de temps perdu by Marcel Proust.
Holy shit.
It's so good, man.
Hell yeah, dude.
I've actually never read a word of it, but my friend / co-host bought me the box set for Christmas, so I'm basically like obligated to do it. Well, at least do Swan's Way and then maybe see how far we get.
Well, let me clarify my position, which is that Swan's Way is like one of the greatest texts ever written, and then the other books are basically nothing, which is a very, very funny thing to do on Proust's part.
Yeah, Proust was a lot like Spencer Stone in that way. He had this one brief flash of brilliance.
But it was 4,600 pages long. So anyways, and that you can follow that on Twitter at Slow Learners Pod. And that's about it.
Sweet. All right. Well, for the podcasty wrap up here, remember to subscribe, rate us, write a review. Helps us on the algorithm. If you like the show, tell a friend, tell your dad, tell Jimmy Kimmel. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Podcastiformy. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, or you're interested in co-hosting a 2-person Clint Eastwood podcast, you can email us at podcastiforme@gmail.com. We are also on Patreon. We're doing the Play Misty for Me Clint films, as well as all kinds of Clint adjacent ephemera, such as potentially Tom Stern's directorial debut, The Almond and the Seahorse from 2022.
Sounds like a Proust novel.
So that's patreon.com/podcastiforme. But all this is at podcastiforme.com and also at shootingyourselfinthehead.com. Thank you to Jeremy Allison for our artwork. Next week, we're talking about Da Mule, and I guess I'm going to have to watch Balthazar, because I've never seen it. So
I don't know that you actually have to talk about The Mule.
Great movie.
I should.
Yes,
though,
you should.
Right?
You
Everyone should watch it.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It answers the question, what if Mouchette was about a donkey instead of a young girl?
Right, yep.
Fascinating.
Yep.
I think there's also a Canadian or something made Christian CGI movie about a donkey who lives in the manger from the Nativity. So maybe I'll watch that as well.
VeggieTales? Yeah, okay.
Something like that, Donkey Tales. Anyway, for all of us here at Podcastiforme, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.